Hola, ahora vamos con Mufon, el cual sabéis que soy miembro y investigador de campo oficial de la Mufon España. Así que os dejo con estos grandes, con el director general y con Josep Guijarro. Disfrutarlo.
Hola, hola. Vamos tomando asiento, por favor, que vamos a continuar con nuestro acto. A ver, a los frioleros, ya hemos dado orden de que suban un par de graditos la temperatura. Pero, ¿ven ustedes este pedazo sala que parece un hangar? Es que aquí guardaban el ovni que está arriba del todo. Pues claro, esto tarda un poquito antes de que ustedes empiecen a notar ese aumento de temperatura. De hecho, yo llevo ahora americana y estoy notando un calor frío que parece que tenga 10 espíritus detrás mío. Igual los tengo. Son ángeles, ángeles que me protegen. La verdad que impresiona, desde aquí veo cabezas hasta el infinito y más allá. Queridos amigos, yo espero que lo estén pasando en grande. Realmente yo estoy... ¿Esto qué significa? ¿Que estás ok? ¿Dicho qué? Que lo estén disfrutando tanto como yo, y eso que tengo que estar arriba y abajo y haciendo mil cosas, ¿no? Pero vamos a continuar con nuestro programa. Seguro que han visto esta fotografía que nos puso Nick Pope, en la que se veía un pasillo con un montón de archivos a un lado y al otro, ¿verdad? ¿La tienen en mente? Bueno, pues MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, que es una organización seguramente la más veterana del mundo para el estudio de los ovnis, tiene eso multiplicado por 10. Seguro que muchos de ustedes han visto una serie, no sé si es en Netflix, en Canal Historia, en uno de estos canales, en la que hay una serie dedicada a MUFON, en la que se muestran y explican diversos casos, algunos muy espectaculares, recogidos en los Estados Unidos, pero piensen que MUFON no es una organización solo y exclusivamente de Estados Unidos, es una organización global. Y me place presentarles, en este caso, a quien ha diseñado la planificación estratégica de esta organización dedicada a los no identificados. Jan Harzan tiene además, ya sabéis que me gusta contar anécdotas de abuelito, ¿no? Tiene además algo de parentesco respecto al interés por los ovnis conmigo. Y es que él dice que a los 8 años se apasionó por el tema de los ovnis, precisamente leyendo un libro de Donald Keyhoe, que era entonces un militar relacionado con el tema de los ovnis. Pues bien, el Tete también leyó ese libro y se quedó impresionado, porque Keyhoe, que fue responsable además de poner la palabra ovni, UFO, a este fenómeno que nos apasiona y de diseñar los primeros protocolos de actuación por parte del gobierno norteamericano, diseñó una operación que se llamaba Operación Señuelo, destinada a que los ovnis bajaran ahí como una especie de aeropuerto, como si los ovnis necesitaran el aeropuerto. Evidentemente se estrellaron contra una pared, pero muestra de alguna manera el interés de Keyhoe y del ejército norteamericano en esos primeros años en relacionarse con el tema de los ovnis. Harzan se ha retirado recientemente de la IBM. No era de IBM a buscar esto, IBM a buscar aquello, no. Era de los que de verdad saben, donde ha estado 37 años relacionado con la tecnología de la información. Y hoy está con todos nosotros para desvelarnos cosas apasionantes del fenómeno OVNI. Ha viajado desde los Estados Unidos y quiero que le recibamos con un fuerte aplauso. Jan Harzan.
Hola Barcelona. Hola Catalunya. Hola España. I've now exhausted all my Spanish, so the rest of the presentation will be in English. I'd like to start out by saying that I have signed no secrecy agreements, so you'll know everything that I know, all right? So my presentation today is in several parts. I'll start by just introducing myself to you, talking a little bit about how I got interested in this subject, a little bit about the history of UFOs, and then I'll take you into MUFON and what we're about and how we operate as an organization. We're a nonprofit NGO. And then I'll take you through some cases, and then we'll talk about some future possibilities. So let's get started. I was born and raised in Southern California. I went to Thousand Oaks High School. I then attended the University of California at Los Angeles and got my degree in nuclear engineering. After graduation, I joined IBM. So for those of you who maybe don't know where all this is the United States. I am on the left coast. You'll be hearing from Achua Kaku later today. He's from the right coast. A close-up of that is my hometown, Thousand Oaks, where I grew up. And I attended UCLA about 35 miles away. That's important because my own personal experience with a craft, a UFO, happened in my hometown, Thousand Oaks. So I then spent 37 years with IBM in sales and marketing, including being a branch manager executive for IBM in Orange County, California, a services executive in Vancouver, British Columbia, and my last 14 years as a project executive on large outsourcing deals with the Boeing company, Walt Disney, and last Technicolor. I retired July 31st, 2013, and began my tenure as the executive director for MUFON the next day on August 1st. I'd like to tell you that was all planned, but it was a complete accident. So here's where I work today, in Irvine, California, which is another 50 miles south of UCLA. And so it's a beautiful area. If you have an opportunity to come to Southern California, I invite you to come by the MUFON offices and say hello. So what do we know after 70 years of chasing UFOs, 50 years of MUFON being in existence? This is what we know. We are definitely not alone. Our case files are full of information of close encounters with people having interaction with non-human entities, and it is a fact that we're not alone. I was delighted to see the December 16th, 2017 New York Times front page article declaring that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. I was even more delighted when Lou Elizondo, who had run that program for 10 years, stepped out and decided to go public with what he knows. The man, in my opinion, is a hero to the world and to all of us, because he really feels strongly that the public should know this information. We owe a debt of gratitude to him. So, I believe that our governments have been trying to tell us in obscure ways that this is a real phenomenon and that we're not alone in the universe. And I go back to 1996 when President Clinton and NASA held a joint news conference to declare to the world that they had found life on Mars. It was in the form of a meteorite that had ancient fossilized little critters in it. And this famous saying was coined by the media, which loves one-liners, by David McKay, who was the chief scientist for the NASA Johnson Space Center, and he said this to the press: based on what we know about life, we believe, and what is in this rock, we believe that the universe is teeming with life. And I thought, oh my gosh, they've just announced that there's life in the universe. And I was a bit shocked when the scientific community began attacking not only the president, but also the scientists at NASA for saying this. And even today, you can Google this, and there's a whole lot of negative press about this rock. It was called meteorite ALH 84001. And they claimed that it had fossilized evidence of primitive life on Mars more than 3.6 billion years ago. Well, fast forward maybe 5-10 years, and all of a sudden we have new space telescopes that are telling us that there are planets around all these stars out in the universe. It's estimated that there are 100 billion stars in our galaxy. But there are 100 billion galaxies. So there are trillions and trillions and trillions of planets around all these stars out there. And very recently, within the last 10 years, we've discovered that many of those planets are actually Earth-like. They look just like our planet. And it is estimated that just within our galaxy, the Milky Way, within our galaxy, there are 17 billion Earth-like planets. So there's lots of opportunity out there for life to develop, much like it has here on Earth. I also had the opportunity 2 or 3 years ago to speak at the Adventurers Club in New York City. They put on a space day. There were 4 astronauts who spoke. There was a lady who ran the New Horizon Pluto mission from NASA. And there was this UFO guy, me. And they all looked at me like, why are you here? And so I found it fascinating that the mission operations manager, her name was Alice Bowman, that stands for Mom, for the New Horizon mission, showed us very clear pictures of the planet Pluto. This is the planet Pluto. It was once removed from the planetary list because it was considered a big rock. When the probe got there, it found that it was really a small or dwarf planet. And what you're looking at there is a sheet of ice over the top of a large ocean on that planet. And what Alice said to the group floored me. She said, we believe, she's speaking for NASA now, we believe that we will find life under that ocean. And I thought, holy heck, this lady just basically said that we're going to find life on Pluto under that sheet of ice in the ocean. So information has been leaking out or dripping out or consciously being released by the powers that be to let the people of the world know that we are not alone. Something all of you have probably known most of your lives. Now, when I do surveys of groups, and this is generally public groups who are not UFO related, I will ask the question, how many people believe that there is intelligent life somewhere far away in the universe? And 100% of the hands go up. Everybody believes there's life somewhere out there, based on what I've just shared. But then I ask the question, how many here believe that that life has visited Earth sometime in the past or is here currently? And only about half of the hands go up. About half. So there's a gap. There's a gap between the people who believe there's life and the people who believe that there's life has come here. And I see our job, your and my job, is to educate the 7.5 billion people on this planet that we truly are not alone. We need to get over this hump, over this gap. We are facing the largest paradigm shift since the 1500s, when Copernicus declared through mathematical equations that the sun was the center of our solar system. This was such a radical thought in the day that people actually got burned at the stake because they believed it. Hopefully no one will get burned at the stake because ETs exist. I'm hoping. The paradigm shift prior to that, which was major, was a man by the name of Jesus Christ, who came to this planet to preach very simply two things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. Be connected to the source of everything, God. Whether you do it through prayer, meditation, scriptures, however you connect. And love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, serve your fellow man. That was it, love. It's what's on this card here. We are love. That's it. That's what his message was. Now man took that message and created all sorts of religions, and that's a whole different discussion, but he was here to teach us how to be with each other and to be connected to the source. So these are huge paradigm shifts that don't happen overnight. Just because Lou Elizondo and the Pentagon say that UFOs are real, we still have a huge amount of the public that's saying, okay, what does it mean to me? And they need to get moved down the curve. That curve is the Kubler-Ross breathing curve. And this is a model that was developed, I believe, in the 60s to deal with how people breathe. Whenever you have a major change, the first reaction to it, whether that change is death, financial destruction, divorce, any major change in one's life, the first step of the 5 steps is denial. It's not happening. It can't be true. There's no way. And a lot of people are stuck at that point with regard to the UFO phenomenon. The next step is anger. I'm mad as heck about it, and I'm going to do something. That's why people get all upset when things change. It's upsetting. Then it moves to bargaining, on to depression, and eventually to acceptance. So I would dare say that all of you in this room have probably moved all the way through the curve, and you're over in acceptance. But we have a huge part of our population that's still behind the denial wall, soon to get to anger, that they've been lied to all these years. But they will too will move through the curve. And if they don't, they will die off, and a new group of people will come up who have the paradigm. And so I think that's where we are today. We're in a major paradigm shift on this planet, It won't happen overnight. I think we have another 10, 20, 50 years to go before we're completely there. But I think for those who are in the know, like you, we can move on and take it. So now I'd like to step back in time before I talk about my own personal encounter and take you back to the beginning of UFOs and how things all got started. And I'm calling it the modern era. And really the first reports we received as citizens was back in World War II, when Allied bombers and fighters over Europe and Asia were seeing balls of light that followed their aircraft. They didn't know what these were. Many of them thought they were secret Russian weapons, or the Russians thought were Nazi weapons, and the Russians and Germans thought they were American weapons. But they were basically balls of light that just followed these aircraft. We still get lots of these reports today, and many of them still follow our airliners and aircraft. And then, of course, in 1947, a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Arnold was flying over Mount Rainier in Washington. He actually was a Forest Service employee and a private pilot. He was searching for a downed aircraft because he was part of the Civil Air Patrol, and he noticed 9 discs skipping across the sky. And that's what he told the press. They were skipping across the sky as if you took a saucer and skipped it across the water. And so the press coined the term flying saucer. And this began the modern era of UFOs, at that time called flying saucers. 2 weeks later, a major event occurred where the U.S. Army released the fact that they had captured one of these discs. The next day, they rescinded the story and said that it never happened. But we know today, based on the research of Stanton Friedman and many, many others, that this in fact was an advanced craft that was recovered. Now, back in the day, when a flying saucer was seen and reported, it was front page news on all the newspapers. As opposed to in the last 50 years, you can't find it. But back then, everything was front page news. In 1952, there was a major flap all over the world and in the United States. And there was a major sighting in July for 7 days of unidentified flying objects over the Capitol, the White House, and the Capitol building. These craft were clocked at 7,000 miles per hour. This is a time when our aircraft couldn't even do 1,000 miles per hour. Of course, the Air Force said this was a weather inversion, and you're not really seeing those objects up there. But we know that there were actual craft there. And then in 1950, Paul Trent in McMinnville, Oregon, saw a craft and photographed it on his farm. That's the top picture. And 4 years later, a French fighter pilot took pictures of another object that looks very similar. And moving on, in 1965, Rex Heflin saw a hat-shaped UFO hovering a few hundred feet off the ground, about 2 miles from where MUFON's headquarters is today, in Orange County, California. And he took 4 Polaroid photos of it. These photos were analyzed by NASA and determined to be real. So this is the time frame when I and my brother encountered our own UFO. Also in Southern California. And here is my story. It took place in Thousand Oaks, in my backyard, April of 1965. I was but a wee baby. No, I was 10 years old. It took place at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. So I've already shown you where Thousand Oaks is. It's about 10 miles inland from Malibu and about 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles. And this is me as a 10-year-old boy with my brother Jeff, who's in the front, light suit. My brother Joel, who was a year older than me, on the right in the dark suit. And my youngest brother Jory, who was about 5 years younger than me, on the left. So I'm in the back in the light suit. Jeff is in the front in the light suit. So Jeff was one of these interesting kids. As an 8-year-old boy, he was fixing the neighbor's television sets. I don't know how you know how to do that as an 8-year-old boy, but he was. He was building crystal radios. We were working on rocket launchers. We had telephones in our air. We had a tree house with telephones in it that went to the house. So we were goofing around with all sorts of electronics and electrical things. He was the bright one. Me, not so much. So we decided that these craft, because we were seeing them in the newspaper as kids, and my father got magazines, men's magazines, in the day, True and Argosy were the two men's magazines in the United States. And there were articles in there about flying saucers. And one of those articles was by Donald Kehoe, who you heard about, who impressed me as a young man because he was a retired Marine major, I believe, and he was saying that these craft were extraterrestrial. This was at a time when television and the military and the government was saying, there's nothing to this. Don't look this way. These are just mirages, people who are crazy. Don't worry about it. But here was a man, a decorated military man, stepping out and telling the world that these were real. So we thought that was interesting. And my brother and I talked about it, and we decided that they must be using some kind of electromagnetical propulsion. And we designed a 30-foot craft with 3 pulsed electromagnetic engines, and we were going to build this. Now, we never did, but that's a different story. But we had this idea to build this craft. And then one day, my mother took us to the store with her, and while she was shopping, he and I went over to the magazine rack, and down in the lower right-hand corner, tucked way back, was a little half-size magazine from the United Kingdom called Flying Saucer Review. We bought it for $1, took it home, and we were sitting on his bed reading it, and the article said that flying saucers are seen around military installations, nuclear power plants, and places where anti-gravity research is being done. So we looked at each other and we said, well, we're doing anti-gravity research, maybe one will come here. 30 days later, a craft showed up. So here is Flying Saucer Review, and here's my home in Thousand Oaks. The day we moved in, you can tell there's no lawn, pretty barren. The day we moved in 1959, there was a big oak tree on the right. And if you'll notice the 2 doors, that front door, to the left of the front door were the bedrooms, to the right was the living room, or the family room and living room, and to the far right was the garage. Now my parents had 4 boys, and they lived in a 2-bedroom house in Woodland Hills. So we had 2 bunk beds in one room, and their bedroom in the other room. And they decided we need a bigger house. So we're going to build a 3-bedroom house. 2 boys in one room, 2 boys in the other room, we'll sleep in the master. That was a good plan until they had an oopsie baby, and it was a girl. So now my father had to figure out how to stuff 5 people, 2 different sexes, into 2 bedrooms. And his idea was, we'll turn the garage into a bunk room. So we built a bunk room, basically another room in our garage. And that's where I slept. So I'm going to show you a picture top down of the house, and it looks like this. My brother was in bedroom 1, the left. That blue is his bed. I was out in the garage in bedroom 3. That's my bed. And it was Saturday morning, I remember distinctly, and he came into my room, and he said, there's someone trying to break into my room. And I said, what do you mean? He said, there's someone playing with the screen. I can hear them out there, and they're trying to do it. And so I said, did you look out your window to see who it was? And he said, no, I didn't look out my window. So I said, well, let's go back to the house and look. So we walked from my room back to his room, and we stood at the doorway, and we looked towards the window. There was nothing happening. So I'm like, okay, let's go out in the backyard and see who it is. So we walked back down the hallway, into the family room, out past the kitchen where there was a clock on the wall that said 6:30 a.m., into the garage, which was my room, out the back door to the end of the house to look back at his window. Nothing was there. So I'm thinking, okay, you got one pulled over on me. It's Saturday morning, 6:30, you got me out of bed, out here in the backyard, and there's nothing here. But then we turned around to go back into the house, and there, 30 feet from us, was a landing craft hovering 10 feet off the ground with 4 landing gear on it, making a humming noise like a transformer on a telephone pole. It was just frozen in the sky. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, these things are real. We're staring at it. It's right here. Very close, 30 feet. My second thought was, oh, this looks man-made. Now, why did I think it looked man-made? Well, the craft was like a brick blown up 10 feet long by 4 feet wide by 3 feet tall, completely smooth. There wasn't a seam or rivet in it. It was completely smooth, with corrugated landing gear coming out, black suction cups on the bottom of the landing gear, and then there was crossbars between the landing gear that went like this, like a scissor, and there was a bolt right there in the center where the scissoring function was. So the bolt, B-O-L-T, bolt, was what made me think it was man-made. But then I stared at it, and I realized, first off, it's only like 3 feet tall. If there's somebody in this craft, they're very tiny. The second thought was, there are no windows or doors on this craft. How do they get in and out of it? And then finally, I looked at the construction of the craft, and it was perfectly smooth, seamless. This is 1965. I do not believe we had the ability to bend metal without seams or rivets. We didn't have the technology in that day, not like we do today with carbon fiber and the Boeing 787. So therefore, I believe it was not ours. And I said to my brother, I'm going to go in the house and get a camera. I'll be right back. So I ran into the garage, turned to go into the house, and the door was locked. So I began pounding on the door. Now, nobody was up at that time except my brother and I. I'm pounding on the door, and I notice knock, knock. That's strange. I'm knock, 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 knock. That's really weird. 2 more knocks. My older brother opens the door and says, "What's up?" And I said, "Nothing," because I wanted to get the camera to get back out. I didn't want to take the time to explain to him what was happening. Got the camera, got back outside. My brother Jeff was standing on the swing set, looking out to the west. The craft was gone. And so I asked him what happened. And he said the craft just was frozen there for about a minute. And then it slowly started to drift and then shot off over the horizon. And so many of our cases are like that. A craft will just shoot off over the horizon at a hypervelocity, if you will. So we looked at each other. I'm 10, he's 9, and we say, who should we tell this to? No one's going to believe us. So we really didn't say a lot to anybody. Honestly, we didn't tell our parents, we didn't tell our older brother, we just kind of kept it to ourselves. On Monday, I went to school, and I was on the playground. I was in 5th grade, and I'm talking to my best friend, Tom, who became a lawyer and is retired now. And I said, Tom, you are not going to believe what happened this weekend. And I took him through the story I just took you through. And he's looking at me, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at me. And so I paused to let him talk. Do you know what he said to me? Do you want to go play baseball? I thought, what? Did you just hear what at that moment, I realized you cannot tell people these types of things because they have no paradigm, no worldview for this, and they can't absorb it. Now, many of you can because you've had your own experiences. So when you hear these stories, it resonates with you. But the general public who has not had a sighting, who has not been exposed to this, it's like over their heads. This is part of the paradigm shift that needs to happen. So, although I don't have a photograph, many years later, I found my theme book for school, and this was the picture that I drew of the craft on my theme book. It's about as good as I can do. I'm not an artist, but it was a tank-like craft with 4 landing gear, black suction cups, brown crossbars, and a bolt in the center there, and it was literally frozen in the sky. So that's my personal experience. So what I like to tell people is that Mufon, as a leader who's had his own personal experience, which I think is a positive thing. So what is Mufon? Mufon is a non-profit corporation. You would call it an NGO here in Spain. We are celebrating our 50th year being as an organization. We operate currently in 43 countries in all 50 states. And basically what we do is collect UFO reports from the public, and we'll talk more about that. We have field investigators who've been trained to investigate these cases, and we publish the results to the public. And we'll show you how we do that. So Mufon was founded in 1969 by a group of gentlemen